Huge. A Barron's article, no delays to tariffs as 70 countries look to make deals. Hit subscribe to this channel right now. You'll hear from Caroline Leavitt, President Trump, Howard Lutnick, Scott Bessent, and others in a second. Your super chat is greatly appreciated. Really quickly. In a press briefing Tuesday afternoon, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said no delays to tariffs are expected. If you look down here, she's talking about 70 countries. She added that nearly 70 countries reached out to Trump to talk about tariffs and that she is ready to listen. These are negotiating tactics. President Obama, Bernie Sanders, every left-leaning economist has been saying for years that American jobs being outsourced overseas is an economic sin. Only President Trump has been able to do anything about it. He's bringing manufacturing back. He's at least trying to. He almost certainly will. If you look at his track record, he won the presidency again because people said, "Hey, we had 4 years of Trump. Then we had we had 4 years of somebody that George Clooney and Democrats admitted had major cognitive issues, and now we have 4 years of Trump again." He won the presidency with everyone knowing, the entire planet knowing that Trump would implement tariffs. Prices increased 70%. I mean, I'm sorry. they could have possibly. Prices increased over 20% in 4 years of Biden. Again, prices increased over 20% in 4 years of Biden. Over 20%. And not one word. Let's get to Caroline Leavitt in a second. Then we'll get to President Trump and everyone else.
You guys ready? Great. Good afternoon, everybody. How are we? Good to see you all. I have a few announcements off the top today. On April 14th, President Trump will welcome President Bukele of El Salvador for an official working visit here at the White House. They will discuss El Salvador's partnership on using their Supermax prison for Tren de Aragua and MS-13 gang members and how El Salvador's cooperation with the United States has become a model for others to work with this administration. On April 17th, President Trump will welcome Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni of Italy for an official working visit at the White House as well. The president's thoughts also remain with the families and communities experiencing devastating loss from the severe storms and flooding affected several states across the central U.S. President Trump approved emergency declarations for Arkansas, Kentucky, and Tennessee, allowing FEMA to provide federal assistance like equipment and resources to support state and local emergency response officials who are leading this response on the ground. Last night, the Supreme Court delivered a massive legal victory to the Trump administration and allowed us to continue removing foreign terrorist invaders under the Alien Enemies Act. This was a smackdown to a rogue left-wing, low-level district court judge who have relentlessly tried to stop President Trump from using his core constitutional powers as head of the executive branch and as commander-in-chief. The highest court in the land made it clear that the President of the United States has the power to protect our homeland and forcibly remove foreign terrorists who pose a grave threat to families, and so spoke the acting president of South Korea this morning. He has tasked Secretary Bessent and U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer to lead these talks. In total, since the Liberation Day announcement, nearly 70 countries have already reached out to the president to begin a negotiation.
So nearly 70 countries have already reached out to President Trump. How on earth is this a bad thing? We had record low poverty with Trump, record highs in household median income. Democrats say, "Oh, we alleviated poverty with our spending bills." No, you didn't. You didn't address any of the causes of poverty. You just you threw hundreds of billions of dollars into essentially stimulus packages. And you caused the poverty by shutting down economic activity. And then the mortgage rates went from 2.6% to over 7% under Biden. Then young liberal couples said, "Oh, we can't afford a home." Well, why do you vote Democrat? Mortgage rates increased exponentially. Why do you consistently vote against your best interests? Young Democratic Party loyalists. It makes no sense at all but 70 countries. Check this out.
Countries are falling over themselves to reform their unfair trade practices and free open their markets to our country. Why? Because these countries greatly respect President Trump in the sheer power of the American market. These countries realize they've gotten filthy rich over the past few decades by imposing substantial tariffs on American-made products and ridiculous non-monetary barriers to block out American industry. The jig is up. Past American presidents sat by and let this happen, but President Trump stood up for our country, and he is saying no more. The president's message has been simple and consistent from the beginning. To countries around the world, bring us your best offers, and he will listen. Deals will only be made if they benefit American workers and address our nation's crippling trade deficits. America does not need other countries as much as other countries need us, and President Trump knows this. He's going to use the leverage of our markets and our country to the advantage of the people he was sworn in to represent. On the other hand, countries like China, who have chosen to retaliate and try to double down on their mistreatment of American workers, are making a mistake. President Trump has a spine of steel, and he will not break, and America will not break under his leadership. He is guided by a firm belief that America must be able to produce essential goods for our own people and export them to the rest of the world. A strong America cannot be solely dependent on foreign countries for our food, medicines, and critical minerals. And America must always maintain a robust defense supply chain. Reprioritizing and strengthening our manufacturing industry are essential national and economic security issues of the utmost importance to President Trump. By focusing on supercharging the onshoring of American manufacturing, the president is already delivering on his promise to usher in an economic golden age for our country. Just look at Friday's jobs report, which smashed expectations for the second straight month. The American economy added 228,000 jobs, nearly 100,000 more jobs than economists predicted, and the fourth highest month for private payroll growth in the past 2 years. There was also a sharp increase in transportation, construction, and warehousing employment. And in just 11 weeks, President Trump has secured more than $1.5 trillion in private sector investment. This is $500 billion more than Joe Biden secured in his entire term. This record-breaking private sector investment will create roughly 350,000 American jobs and counting. If you add up all of the investment pledges from foreign governments, President Trump has secured an incredible $5 trillion in total investments already.
So what is the rebuttal from Democrats and from naysayers? Oh, it's not $5 trillion, it's really $3 trillion. What is the rebuttal? Oh, it's not going to help the working class, because Democrats work with buzzwords and ideology linked to communism and socialism. We care about the working class, says the wonderful morally superior. Okay, how did the working class do under Biden? How have they done under President Obama and Bush? So with Trump, the working class did a lot better his first time around. And they're going to do a lot better than ever, because the tariffs are meant to negotiate manufacturing jobs and other jobs being brought into the country. In addition, we want to sell our products around the world. There's no reason for us to have an over $1 trillion trade deficit. There's no reason for us to pay hundreds of billions of dollars in tariffs and the entire globe pay $50 billion in our tariffs prior to quote-unquote Liberation Day. So Democrats and media and like the left of center in this country has been talking about the working class and poverty, and Trump is doing everything possible to address the root causes of poverty. Democrats love these buzzwords: root causes, working class, the working poor. President Trump is literally going to bat for all of these individuals, but the way Democrats view things is, oh, let's not fix the poverty. Let's hand out checks and essentially, maybe they don't want this on purpose, but keep people impoverished forever. The Democratic Party, the way it runs, maybe a lot don't want this on purpose, but it keeps people in poverty forever. The AOC, Bernie Sanders, Nancy Pelosi mentality. We're getting $5 trillion in investment from around the world. to build factories, to invest in this country, and the trade, the tariffs are meant to ensure that Americans can manufacture in this country. You don't need where if you have a high school education and you want to work hard at a factory, God bless you. You'll be able to do that in Trump's America. A much different reality than what Democrats and media want you to imagine.
In the months ahead, President Trump's pro-growth economic agenda will be fully realized. The largest deregulatory effort in American history is underway. Unnecessary, burdensome, costly red tape is being eliminated by this entire federal government every day, driving down costs and massively boosting small businesses. So far, President Trump's deregulation effort has already saved Americans more than $180 billion, equivalent to $2,100 per family of four. The president's drill baby drill energy agenda, which he will discuss later this evening in the East Room, is capitalizing on the abundance of natural resources under our feet to generate more affordable electricity, cheap gas, and quality new jobs. All of this will combine to end the Biden-imposed cost of living crisis that's absolutely crushed American families. Under President Trump, the American energy industry will lead the globe over the next century, delivering lower prices and significantly strengthening our country's economic position. At the president's direction, Republicans in Congress are working quickly to pass one big, beautiful bill, which will also include the largest tax cut in American history. As President Trump has said, the House must pass this budget resolution quickly. Here in our new media seat today, we have Jasmine Wright, the White House reporter for Notice. Notice is a nonprofit and nonpartisan news site which launched in early 2024. They've gained millions of readers across the country since. Newsroom's goal is both to inform readers and train the next generation of politics and policy journalists. They also partner with state newsrooms to give local communities more knowledge of what their representatives are doing in Washington, D.C. With that, please kick us off, Jasmine.
Thanks so much, Caroline. A couple questions for you. The first one being, can you explain the White House's evolution from this is not a negotiation on tariffs to countries should pitch us and start negotiations on tariffs?
Sure. As the president said yesterday, Jasmine, both things can be true at the same time. And it is a non-negotiable position that the United States has faced a national security and economic crisis because of the unfair trade practices by countries around the world. As for the president, I have maintained this position. The entire administration has always said that President Trump is willing to pick up the phone and talk. And the president met with his trade team this morning, and he directed them to have tailor-made trade deals with each and every country that calls up this administration to strike a deal. And listen, and each and every one of these trade deals should be tailored and unique based on that country's markets, based on that country's exports, the imports here in the United States of America. What makes the most sense for the American worker and for our industry? The president is focused on putting America first.
So was the evolution not factored in or determined by kind of the tumult in the stock market? Was that not a part of the consideration to start making these negotiations and deals?
Again, I would reject that there was an evolution. On day one, we had said that the president will always pick up the phone for other nations and other companies that call this administration. The president always has a listening ear, and it's a non-negotiable fact that America has faced a national security and economic crisis for many decades, and President Trump is just the first to address this.
And then my last question, how will negotiations change how much revenue the White House is planning to make from the tariffs?
Well, that has yet to be seen, but as the president said, the reciprocal tariffs, which will continue to go in effect as these deals are negotiated and ongoing, will generate trillions of dollars in revenue to the United States. And this is twofold. The president wants to onshore jobs here to the United States of America. He wants to boost our manufacturing industry. He also wants to tackle these crippling deficits with almost every single country around the world. Jackie.
Thanks, Caroline. The Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, warned that some of these negotiations might take up to months, that we could be doing this through April, May, and into June. And then you had Kevin Hassett say it's going to take a lot for the president to put his signature on the line, so he wants to make sure there's a good deal for America. Is the president operating on any sort of a timeline or deadline where he wants this completed by?
Well, we always move at Trump speed here at the White House, which is incredibly fast. I know you all know that from covering this White House day to day. The president likes to get things done, but he's very much focused on ensuring that
Isn't this so much better than the absolute catastrophe, the abomination of Trump's of the White House press corps in Trump's first term? Oh my God, the performance artists. Trump's first term, the White House press corps was like a disgruntled class of angry, wonderful, highly educated, liberal journalism students with with what they considered the substitute teacher in Trump. Okay, traditionally the White House press corps, oh my God, they're so docile and respectful and almost reverent of the Democrat. But when it came to Trump, it was like, oh my God, let's bring truth to power. Meanwhile, all of these criminal acts were taking place, so many that Biden had to preemptively pardon 1 million people. But this is wonderful. This is how things should be. Hit subscribe, by the way, if you're new to this channel.
These deals are good for the American worker. They are good for American manufacturing. And again, that they tackle these crippling deficits with these countries. All options are on the table for each country. But again, these are going to be
Lou, thank you again. As always, Lou, to the super chat. Thank you. Paul, everybody here, thanks for watching.
Tailor-made deals. They are not going to be off-the-rack deals, as the president has called it, and he has directed his entire trade team to be part of this effort. So that includes Secretary Bessent and our National Economic Director, Kevin Hassett. It also includes Secretary Lutnick, Peter Navarro, the entire trade team, Jamieson Greer, who was on the Hill today. Everybody who was involved in this incredible, fair, reciprocal trade agenda will continue to be involved in negotiating these deals.
And then yesterday, Goldman Sachs put out a research note. It put the odds of a recession at 45% within the next 12 months, up from 35%. But Peter Navarro guaranteed last night no recession. Does the president agree with him on that? I know the president in the past has been leery of making definitive statements on that.
I can speak for the president, and I can speak for the optimism that he sees in our economy every day. Again, when you talk about the massive deregulatory efforts that are happening across the board, when you talk about how oil prices are down, gas prices are down, egg prices are down, we're cutting costs for the American worker, for the American consumer. We also see trillions of dollars of investments pouring into this country every day, and we're working hard now on the tariff side of the president's economic agenda. But don't forget, the next side of this is tax cuts, and we're counting on Capitol Hill to get those done, the largest tax cuts in history.
Does that mean that without those tax cuts coming through, that the likelihood of a recession is greater?
No, that's not what I said. I'm just saying be mindful of the whole of government economic approach that this administration is taking every day. Sure. Go ahead.
Thank you, Caroline. You just said that one of the reasons these tariffs are going into effect is that some countries have been ripping off the United States, but some of the tariffs target countries like Madagascar, Bangladesh, with very high levels of poverty. So can you explain how the president wants to correct the deficit with those countries? Is there a plan, for example, to onshore the textile industry that these countries are known because, and just like, can you be specific about those like low income countries?
Well, first of all, the reciprocal tariff rates that were implemented by country were focused on the monetary tariff that those countries have imposed on the United States, but also the non-monetary tariff barriers and the regulations, if you will, that have been put into effect over the years, making it harder for America to export to these countries. These were very carefully crafted numbers. There was also a 10% baseline tariff across the board, as well, as you know. Moving forward, the president will talk to any country that picks up the phone to call, and I can tell you the phones have been ringing off the hook, wanting to talk to this administration, this president, and his trade team to try to strike a deal. And it's because the world knows that they need the United States of America. They need our markets. They need our consumer. The president has a lot of leverage on his side because he has the best economy and the best country in the world that he leads, and he knows that. And it's about dang time we finally have a president who uses that economic leverage to benefit American workers. And that's what the president is trying to do. Maggie.
Caroline, thanks. Does the president endorse something that Howard Lutnick said on television this weekend, which was that the army of millions and millions of human beings screwing in little screws to make iPhones, that kind of thing is going to be moving to the U.S.? Is that how the president envisions manufacturing shifting? And if so, how long would that take, roughly?
The president wants to increase manufacturing jobs here in the United States of America, but he's also looking at advanced technologies. He's also looking at AI and emerging fields that are growing around the world that the United States needs to be a leader in as well. So there's an array of diverse jobs, more traditional manufacturing jobs, as you discussed, but also jobs in advanced technologies. The president is looking at all of those. He wants them to come back home.
But iPhones specifically, is that something that he thinks is the kind of technology that can move to the U.S.?
Absolutely. He believes we have the labor, we have the workforce, we have the resources to do it. And as you know, Apple has invested $500 billion here in the United States. So if Apple didn't think the United States could do it, they probably wouldn't have put up that big chunk of change.
Is there a liberal Democrat or a conservative? Is there any leftist or socialist or communist or free market capitalist that has even stated those words, that an iPhone could be built in the United States of America? With President Trump, that is hopefully going to take place. These are things that Democrats campaigned on. Trump is Bernie Sanders, but a more conservative Bernie Sanders. I was the biggest Bernie Sanders booster on the internet, according to the Huffington Post. I love Trump. And I became a supporter of President Trump like 7 years ago. And the reason, ladies and gentlemen, I did is because all the things Bernie Sanders talked about, ensuring there is not unfettered immigration. That's not the main thing. Is the ending wars, which President Trump has done and is focusing on. I thought Bernie Sanders would do that. He's part of the Democratic Party. He says he's an independent. That's nonsense. So Bernie Sanders said nothing about a nuclear confrontation daily in Biden's administration. That happened, literally happened. And that country was invaded under Biden's administration, not Trump's. Bernie Sanders against Trans-Pacific Partnership. I mean, a lot of things that he talked about, wealth inequality. He was against, not enforcing immigration laws because that does take jobs away from American citizens. All of these things, you think that Trump and Bernie Sanders are different. They are. Trump actually believes in what he says. Trump actually defends the interests of the working class. With President Trump, we're talking about iPhones being built in the United States of America, ending perpetual wars, bringing American jobs back that were outsourced, enforcing immigration laws to also protect the American economy or American jobs. And also, it has nothing to do with immigration. Like, Trump loves immigrants. His beautiful wife, Melania, the first lady, is an immigrant. There's a legal process that Democrats signed off on through Congress. Okay? So it's like, what are we talking about here? But anyway, President Trump is doing things that the left talked about, but were too either cowardly or too inept to actually implement.
Elena.
Hi, Caroline. It's clear the president has found the world's attention with these tariffs. Is he considering at all potentially holding off on imposing some of them before the deadline, or maybe later, reversing them because he's having these negotiations and having these good talks with other leaders?
The president was asked and answered this yesterday. He said he's not considering an extension or a delay. I spoke to him before this briefing. That was not his mindset. He expects that these tariffs are going to go into effect. And you said something very important, Elena, in your question. You said the president has captivated the attention of the world. Absolutely, he has. And it's about time we have a president in the Oval Office who is putting the world on notice and is putting the American people first force and, again, is using the leverage of the United States to negotiate good trade deals.
Just a quick follow-up. Sure. There's been some public sparring between Elon Musk and the president's trade advisor, Peter Navarro, on some of these tariffs. Musk actually referred to Navarro today as being, quote, dumber than a sack of bricks. Are you at all, or is the administration, the president, all concerned that this is maybe impacting the public's understanding of these tariffs? It might be messing with the message on it?
No, look, these are obviously two individuals who have very different views on trade and on tariffs. Boys will be boys, and we will let their public sparring continue. And you guys should all be very grateful that we have the most transparent administration in history. And I think it also speaks to.
By the way, that's a very offensive statement to a specific political ideology that a part of the Democratic Party worships. Why on earth would that be an offensive statement? That's an interesting question.
To the president's willingness to hear from all sides, that he has people at the highest levels of this government in this White House who have very diverse opinions on very diverse issues, but the president takes all opinions in mind and then he makes the best decision based on the best interests of the American public. Tiana.
Thanks, Caroline. On Truth Social today, Trump was talking about one-stop shopping talks with foreign leaders, bringing leaders to the U.S., to Washington, and talking to them about tariffs, but also other topics. So is that part of his strategy to bring the leaders to Washington and trying to get deals, outside of tariffs on foreign policy issues as well?
I think the president, again, is going to have a custom, tailor-made approach to each and every country. And if that means discussions of foreign aid, of our military presence in these countries, how those troops are paid for, come to the table, that could be part of the negotiation in these economic negotiations. But it's the president's economic team who will be leading these. These are tariff and trade negotiations. And yes, they will be one-stop shopping for each and every country. They will be, as the president said again, tailor-made, not off the rack to each and every country based on America's needs.
And can you confirm?
How are you? Thank you so
Good.
much, Carol from Lynn's LTV. So President Trump has designated Tariffs as a foreign terrorist organization and deported its members while also moving to restrict Venezuela's oil exports. Is the administration preparing additional military or economic actions against Venezuela and the Maduro regime? And my second question is about Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett. Is the administration have a comment on her decision to go with the liberals and go actually with the Tariffs? This is the same justice that actually sided against January 6th hostages last year. So is the administration have a comment? Are they disappointed in Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett?
To your first question, I don't have any actions to read out in terms of Venezuela. The president has imposed secondary tariffs on the Maduro regime and on Venezuela in the form of oil, which is obviously going to have a crippling effect on the Maduro regime, and that's the intended effect of this administration. As for the justice you mentioned, as for the Supreme Court, we've made our feelings very clear. We believe this was a massive victory. Certainly, we wish this was a 9-0 decision because we firmly believe that the president was well within his constitutional authority, and the Supreme Court made that very clear last night, and they put Judge Boasberg in his place. We called on the Supreme Court to.
So with 70 countries already at the negotiating table, at this point right now, it's China. No country can withstand the tariffs for too long. The United States actually can, but that's not the goal of President Trump.
The largest tariff and trade barrier country in the world is China, and they don't have inflation. So these things don't occur the way people suggest they do. This is a reordering of global trade for the benefit of America. These people have all been living in our house. They've been driving our car. They come by and visit, open our fridge, and eat our food whenever they want. They've taken advantage of us.
Welcome back to Sunday Night in America. Trade is not the only reason to crack down on China. China steals intellectual property and floods the market with cheap, dangerous knockoffs and allows fentanyl to flow and competes against domestic manufacturers who have to follow different rules. Yes, there are 1.5 billion potential customers in China, but at what cost? And speaking of trade, the U.S. does not use the Suez Canal often, but Europe does, and the Houthis don't care who they shoot at. So is there an American interest in taking the Houthis out? Tom Cotton served in uniform and chairs the Senate Intel Committee. Welcome, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being with us. Tariffs are dominating the conversation, but China doesn't trade fairly even without this current debate. So what should our trade approach be with that country?
Well, good evening, Trey. Thanks for having me on. As it happens, I've just written a book about China, and in no small part about the way they've cheated American workers and businesses for decades. As I argue in 7 Things You Can't Say About China, China has waged an economic world war, especially against the United States, going back several decades. They've subsidized their own companies. They give them all kinds of concessions on taxes and land and regulation. Oftentimes they own these companies, something no American company can compete with fairly. At the same time, they attack our companies. They hack into their systems to steal their intellectual property. They exclude them from the Chinese market. They have forced technology transfers if they admit them to the Chinese market. So what President Trump has long tried to do is level the playing field with communist China. And it's not just the tariffs, as you say, they're also taking important policy steps like closing the so-called de minimis loophole, which allows hundreds of dollars of goods and individual orders to come to the United States from China, undermining American businesses, evading American tax and tariff laws. He closed that as well. So that's just a small first step to making communist China play by the same rules that the rest of the civilized world does.
Chairman, in addition to being a prolific author, you served in uniform. I consider you to be a military expert. I spent some time recently with the president of Finland. He went to college in the U.S., by the way. You probably knew that. They share a long border with Russia. So he's watching the future of NATO, particularly as the U.S. relates to NATO. What do you think the future of NATO is?
States can tolerate, and this is long overdue, as I argued.
So, ladies and gentlemen, there are a number of other reasons for these tariffs. Let's listen to Scott Bessent really quickly.
Now is U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Mr. Secretary, welcome back. We appreciate it very much. So as I understand it from your postings, the President has tasked you and U.S. Trade Rep Jamieson Greer to implement the President's vision with respect to negotiations on Japan among our closest allies. So you and Jamieson Greer are going to
love Japan, love South Korea, love a number of countries that I think that can be wonderful for the U.S. economy. We can be just as wonderful for them as well.
Pick up the ball and negotiate with Japan. Can you tell us more? This is a very important development.
Larry, Larry, first of all, good afternoon. Thanks for having me on. And it is a very important development. And, I'll tell you that the kind of impatience that we've seen with commentators, with the market over the weekend or since April 2nd has surprised me. And President Trump, as you know, is better than anyone at giving himself maximum leverage. So what he's done is we outlined the tariffs on April 2nd and then gave the countries several days to think about it. As I advised on many shows on April 2nd, I suggested that the foreign officials keep your cool, they do not escalate, and come to us with your offers on how you're going to drop tariffs, how you're going to drop non-tariff barriers, how you're going to stop your currency manipulation, how you're going to stop the subsidized financing. And at a point, President Trump will be ready to negotiate. And he had a very, very productive call with Prime Minister, with the Japanese Prime Minister this morning, and he has asked me and Jamieson Greer to take the lead on this. And as you said in your last segment, President Trump is going to be directly involved in those negotiations.
Mr. Secretary, did Japan put an offer on the table? I mean, some places have said we'll put zero tariffs. We've heard that. I mean, actually, whether you buy it or not, the European Union, von der Leyen said that they would go 0 and 0. Does Japan put an offer on the table yet?
I haven't seen anything from them, but Larry, I can tell you that there are 50, 60, maybe almost 70 countries now who have approached us. So it's going to be a busy April, May, maybe into June. And Japan is a very important military ally. They're a very important economic ally. And the U.S. has a lot of history with them. So I would expect that Japan's going to get priority just because they came forward very quickly, but it's going to be very busy. And if President Trump, again, gave himself maximum negotiating leverage, and just when he achieved the maximum leverage, he's willing to start talking.
So there's some confusion about these numbers. We looked up.
And that's what it's about, ladies and gentlemen. Leverage. Leverage. This is about negotiating. Now, even if, let's say you don't like Trump, let's say you don't like his administration, you think that, you wished Harris would win, or Biden, whatever, who knows. Let's say you wished Harris would have won, okay, or Biden would have stayed because he was so fantastic. Did Democrats or did Bush, never Trump Republicans, did the old Republican Party or the modern Democratic Party emphasize manufacturing jobs? No. Did they emphasize bringing home jobs that were outsourced? No. Have you ever heard, and with Caroline Levitt, you heard that, and on this live stream you heard that. Have you ever heard anyone talk about iPhones being built in the United States of America? No, you never heard that. We have simply conceded for decades. We have simply conceded. And the repercussion is, the frightening alternative or consequence of this type of mentality is higher prices. Oh, we had 20% increase in higher prices. Democrats were actually campaigning on, so what? Who cares about prices? Just vote Democrat.
Up the International Trade Administration shows Japan with a 4.3% average tariff, 4.3% average tariff, okay? But in the chart that President Trump showed last week, the so-called reciprocal charge-offs, it has Japan at 46%. Now, I know how you get to 46% using deficits as a trade deficit as a share of imports, but that's an odd way to look at it. I mean, really, there may be twice as much as us, but they're not all this much. I mean, 46 is a much higher number than 4.3, and I think there's a lot of confusion in the market about what becomes necessary here.
Well, Larry, first of all, one of the reasons President Trump cut the numbers in half was because of what you just said. The other is that academic studies have shown that it's the non-tariff trade barriers that are the real problem in U.S. having free and fair access to these markets. I mean, if you think about it, I think on most products, the Chinese tariff is only 5%. But does anybody think that that's a free market? It could be the testing in cars. It could be GMO restraints in food. I mean, come on. We buy $3 billion a year of Australian beef, but we can't export to them. So there are a lot of non-tariff trade barriers, and Japan's are quite high. And I am sure that we will have a very productive negotiation with the Japanese delegation.
But you just heard, I don't know if you heard Art Laffer in the prior interview, but Art doesn't believe that the trade deficit should be a metric. I don't really either. I mean, Mr. Secretary, if you get your tax cuts, and I guess you're well on the way, you get your deregulation. These are all huge pro-growth items. Okay. We will grow. We, the United States, will grow faster than Japan. We will grow faster than almost anybody. Therefore, almost by definition, by growing faster than the rest of the world, we're always going to have a trade deficit. So I don't know why you'd want to use the trade deficit in a calculation for a reciprocal charge. I understand your point about non-tariff barriers. I get that. That's why I would have chosen a handful of countries, I don't know, maybe 10 or a dozen countries, and really carefully pinpointed it. But to apply this to the whole world on the basis of trade deficits, is that really the best in your judgment? You've been around a long time, you've looked at these, you've done analysis. Is that really where we should be at?
Well, look, Larry, the trade deficit, as you and Art know, is a result of three things. It's a result of the terms of trade, it's a result of our budget deficit, and it's the result of the level of the dollar. And we want a strong dollar. We are getting our budget deficit under control, which I actually think will help with the trade deficit. And then the third part is the tariff or the trade barriers, which we're seeing. So I am confident that we will, again, as I said, the four factors will be tariffs, non-tariff trade barriers, the currency manipulation, and whether it's wage or industrial subsidies. And I think we're going to have very, very productive negotiations with these.
The big talking point from the naysayers and all the wonderful, very good capitalist / socialist, communist, far left economists. I mean, it's like, if your ideology is tax and a powerful state and a more socialist or a government that is more of a communist or socialist type of system, maybe you don't understand why these tariffs are taking place in the first place. But Scott Bessent is basically saying, look, we have $1 trillion+ trade deficit. The entire world's a part of it. That's why every country in the world, there's a percentage, whether it has to do directly with the tariffs they impose upon us, or perhaps they manipulate their currency, or perhaps there are other barriers to entry into their market. That's how we came up with the tariff. But oh my God, they had such a good time. Oh my God, this tariff. We looked at the mathematical formula for the tariff. It doesn't make any sense. Like, you don't even want any of this anyway, so don't worry about it. Anyway, hit subscribe to this channel. I'll try to be back tonight. If I'm not back tonight, I will be back tomorrow morning. We'll rock and roll, probably 11 or 12 or 1 p.m. God bless you all, ladies and gentlemen. God bless America.